Thank you, Scott. Been with that guy for 34 years. As this difficult and challenging academic year has progressed, a year when I have been aware that this would be my final year of teaching at AU, I have become increasingly retrospective, increasingly ruminative, one of my favorite words. To ruminate, of course, means to meditate upon, to ponder, to reflect. My reflections have included countless recollections of wonderful memories, many of them within the classroom, but many as well within the environs of the English department or in my office with a student who wanted to talk at length about her or his academic interests, sometimes to talk about her or his life and faith. Of course, these ruminations have been accompanied by many different emotions. And by far, the predominant emotion that I have felt has been gratitude. First of all, I am very grateful for the many fine students that I have had the privilege to teach during my 34 years here, 2 less than Scott, here at my alma mater. Among the thousands of students within my courses over the years, there have been so many intelligent, perceptive, and highly inquisitive students who have genuinely desired to address some of the very difficult and challenging questions before us as human beings, and to ponder the agonies and the victories, the sorrows and the joyous epiphanies of human experience by way of poems, plays, essays, stories, and novels. I have experienced countless engaging and profound discussions in the classroom. I am very grateful for those discussions, and I shall miss them. I am also very grateful for many colleagues here at AU who have been supportive and encouraging, sometimes when I very much needed support and encouragement. Friendly, kind, loving colleagues, both in the English department and outside of the department. Whether through a quick email or a kind word in the stairway or perhaps a long visit in my office, these colleagues of the past and of the present have boosted my morale and have reminded me that we work at a place where Christian love and compassion is expressed and exhibited each and every day. I am deeply grateful for such camaraderie. I am also very grateful that 34 years ago, in the spring of '87, I was hired to return to my alma mater, to this place where I too grew as an undergraduate student from 1974 to 1978. 34 years ago, when I was an instructor at Penn State, having earned my doctorate there the year before, I received a call from Gib Weber, the chair of the department at the time, who wanted to know if I was on the market for a professorial position because the American Lit person here at AU had just resigned in order to move to California with her husband at the close of the academic year. I had not contacted anyone at AU for several years. So Gib Weber's call took me by surprise, to say the least. In fact, the timing of that call was incredible, because I was within days of signing a contract to teach at the University of Missouri-Rolla, where I didn't know a soul, a school best known for its geology and engineering programs. Instead, after a successful day of interviews and presentations here at AU, I ended up signing a contract 3 or 4 weeks later to teach here. On the day when I signed that contract, I could not help but think of my paternal grandfather, Blair Radaker, who had served for decades as a Church of God pastor in Western Pennsylvania. When I was in my early teens in the late 60s, he had talked with me about my growing interest in history and literature. And so years later, he left instructions that upon his death, I was to receive his 1918 Underwood portable typewriter. The small, clunky machine that he had purchased when he, a young man working in the coal mines, had felt the call to become a pastor. I proudly display that old typewriter in a prominent place in my study at home. My grandfather passed away 2 years before I began teaching here at AU. Over the years, I have kept in touch with some of my former Penn State peers. Some of them are very pleased with their careers and where they ended up teaching, but many of them have ended up working in academic departments that are very competitive, judged each and every year by the number and quality of their publications, with little to no recognition for their efforts in the classroom. For many of them, any joy that they may find in teaching is underappreciated and undervalued by those who evaluate their performance. During the interview process at the University of Missouri-Rolla 34 years ago, I could tell very early that they were much more interested in my current scholarly publications and my potential for publishing in the future than in my potential as a teacher. And so, among the many reasons I am grateful, very grateful, for returning to Anderson after my years at Penn State, I am most grateful for the degree to which AU values the importance of teaching. Now, I want to make it clear that I greatly appreciate the importance of research and scholarship within the academy. And over the past 36 years, I've contributed in a small way by publishing several articles in academic journals and encyclopedias. But over the years, I have come to realize increasingly that my great love is to teach. Whether in the traditional undergraduate classroom or by way of one-man performances and lectures to audiences throughout our country and even beyond our country. In addition to the support I've received over the years from the Faculty Development Committee, hereafter referred to as the FDC, to pursue research on 3 of my favorite authors, Henry David Thoreau, Edward Abbey, and Annie Dillard, research that did lead to publications, I am deeply grateful to the FDC for also supporting my efforts to develop 3 dramatic portrayals that have provided me with the precious opportunity to teach by way of dramatic monologues that I have designed and scripted by way of my own research. Thanks in part to the support of the FDC, I began offering my portrayal of Henry David Thoreau, the experts call him that, not Thoreau, in 1991. And I'm going to go off script just for a couple minutes here, partly because of Fritz's presence. Over the years, I've offered my Thoreau hundreds of times, but perhaps the most memorable laugh Thoreau ever received, he was presenting to about 800 some people in a tent in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And the tent was set up in such a way so that the audience, when they looked behind me, saw the small little bay that separates Portsmouth from Maine. So Thoreau has this line in Walden, his masterpiece, when he complains that we are in great haste to construct a magnetic telegraph from Maine all the way to Texas. But what if Maine has nothing worthwhile to say to Texas? And I swear I had to stop for 2 minutes. That crowd there in New Hampshire thought that was awfully funny. But perhaps my most profound performances and rewarding, and I've had so many, as Thoreau, took place on the 150th anniversary of Thoreau defending, one of the first intellectuals in New England, defending John Brown's actions at Harper's Ferry. I just couldn't believe that I was there. I was so honored to offer my Thoreau. They rang the very bell before my performance. The Thoreau rang to get the attention of the people in Concord that he had something to say. And there have been several books written lately about Thoreau's impact. He wasn't the activist that people like Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison were, but that script made a difference. That speech made a difference. Now, of course, the civil disobedience made much more of a difference in history. Nevertheless, when I portray Thoreau, I almost always include the John Brown material to make him more complex and to help us realize that this champion of passive resistance, nonviolent resistance, eventually was so upset with this country that he supported John Brown's violent actions at Harper's Ferry. It's dramatic stuff. 2 days later in Boston, I presented 150th anniversary. And 2 days later in Worcester, that's how they'd say it, using a podium that Emerson and Frederick Douglass and Thoreau had used. So if you're into history, you can imagine how much I love those performances. In 2009, I began offering my portrayal of C.S. Lewis. And my most memorable, so many, but perhaps the most memorable was at a conference I'll mention in a moment. And in 2016, my portrayal of Winston Churchill, which has been a lot of fun so far. In all, I've offered over 550 performances in most of the states throughout our nation, and one very special performance in 2011 as C.S. Lewis at a Christian Teachers Conference in Beijing, China. Even though my time of teaching here at AU is now coming to an end, I fully intend to continue to teach by way of my one-man dramatic performances, and oftentimes if I'm there for a week in Chautauqua, I offer lectures as well. I'll do that as long as venues are willing to hire me, and as long as my aging brain can still memorize my monologues. And now my ending. As I stated earlier, I have been increasingly ruminative this past year, and so at times I have felt compelled to reread certain essays by some of my favorite contemporary ruminative authors. Those who are known for their ability to produce highly engaging personal essays, a particular art form, I think. Among my favorites are Annie Dillard, Wendell Berry, Edward Abbey, Stephen Jay Gould, Lewis Thomas, and James Baldwin. Another one of my favorites is Scott Russell Sanders, a retired professor of English from Indiana University. Without a doubt, I enjoy reading his essays, in part because he and I share three things in common that we once briefly discussed. We both love the writings of Thoreau. We both spent most of our teen years, though it was separated by about 15 years, he was there first, living near a particular stretch of land in Northeast Ohio known for its dense deer population. And we both learned to appreciate craftsmanship by working with our carpenter fathers. Recently, I came across one of my favorite essays by Scott Russell Sanders that I remember reading avidly when it was first published in 1995, my 8th year here. It's an essay entitled Faith and Work. As he observes the Finnish carpenter who is rebuilding his 70-year-old kitchen in Bloomington, Indiana, Scott admires the union of hard work and serenity that the carpenter displays. A diligent and joyful contentment that he has also observed in, quote, farmers and nurses, welders and cooks, truck drivers, janitors, teachers, librarians, lawyers and clerks, end quote. After describing the varied personalities of certain diligent workers he has come to know well, including his paternal grandmother and grandfather, Scott declares his certainty that, quote, the willingness to work hard without complaint, indeed with gusto, has less to do with temperament than with conviction, end quote. He continues, quote, if you believe that work is a calling, a discipline, a way of exercising your gifts, even a way toward God, then work will seem to you as natural, as desirable, as breathing, end quote. In essence, Scott Russell Sanders is intent upon defining what he calls good work. The kind of work that, quote, enriches the world and also enriches the worker, end quote. If our work is nothing more than toilsome drudgery, then it drains us. It diminishes us. But performing good work can renew us and form us in mysterious ways. He writes, whatever else we make through our labor, we also make ourselves, end quote. On the final page of his essay, Scott explains how the fine furniture and buildings of the Shakers was an expression of their faith. And then he quotes Thomas Merton, the noted Christian mystic and writer, who greatly admired the Shakers. One feels, Merton writes, that for the Shaker craftsman, love of God and love of truth in one's own work came to the same thing. And that work itself, was a prayer, a communion with the inmost spiritual reality of things, and so with God, end quote. To be sure, there have been days when my endeavors as a teacher, either here at AU or in some other place beyond AU, have not felt like a form of prayer or communion. But there have been days, many days, when my work has felt like a form of prayer and communion. And that has renewed and formed me. And for that, I am deeply grateful.